Hey, if you've ever wondered what's the best bank for small business, or how to choose that bank in the for a small business, you've come to the right place. You've got a lot of experience, and it might be a little different than you'd expect. As entrepreneurs and business owners, we know that if we have a clear plan, anything becomes possible. And if you can have a clear plan, a clear process to create that plan, and a way to create clarity with your partner or spouse, you can drive to amazing heights. So when it comes to figuring out what is the best bank for small business, there's three primary areas we're going to go through. The first is interviewing those bankers, and I'll give you questions that you should be asking and how to interview them. The second is when you're interviewing them, asking a lot of questions and being curious, but also being very direct with it. And then third, are they going to be willing to help you with referrals and other relationships? So when we talk about interviewing banks, unfortunately I should say this, banks, a lot of times attorneys, accountants, whoever it may be, well, just because they wear a suit and they charge a lot per hour doesn't mean you work for them. And it's really, really important to remember that you're interviewing them to see if they're going to be a good fit for you. So when we start building a team of advisors in your small business, you can have a team of advisors that are experts that work only for you. And a lot of times they'll start off by giving you an hour, or a half hour to an hour for free. But this group of advisors is going to be made up of typically with an accountant. I usually recommend finding a good small business accountant first, then having a good small business attorney. Then you can go to small business insurance person, marketing person, bookkeeping, that type of thing. I'm going to encourage that you talk with these people and use that as the very first step in figuring out what bank should I be going to. The reality is all banks are not created equal, but all banking regulations and everybody's fear of getting sued is. So there are a lot of banks that will be happy. They'll be happy to sit down, take your application, do whatever the hoops are that you want, that they tell you have to do, but they're not going to work with you. Now, this doesn't mean that they're being racist or sexist or any of those things. What it means, though, is that as a small business, your type of business typically doesn't fall within the portfolio, within their risk and credit structures. It's not anything personal, but they're never going to tell you that because they're afraid you're going to sue them for being discriminatory in some other way. We live in a bizarro world where that's how it happens. So if you can start with your small business accountant, your accountant is going to have an idea of other small businesses and who are they using as bankers. Or even find other people who are currently in small business and ask who is their banker and ask for that introduction. So keeping in mind, when you go do the introduction, sometimes somebody may be wearing a $1,000 suit and they're going to use a lot of big words. And if they have that sort of attitude that, oh, well, look, you just sit down, kid, and I'll tell you how things work, I'm going to urge you to say, hey, thank you very much for investing the time and walk away. Because they may use different words and different language, excuse me, but it's their obligation to help you understand what those mean and help you understand the clarity and the relationship. Now, I've worked with leadership teams and individuals and companies for 30 years. Excuse me, rude bastard. And through that time, there's times when I finally get somebody to consider changing their bank, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know it could be like this. Well, it's because we're often afraid of going in and asking and interviewing a banker. So to start with, I'm going to encourage you to A, reach out to whoever you currently know that owns a business, and or if you're starting to build that team of advisors, and there's other videos on this channel, please look at those that talk about for your accountant, for your banker, for your attorney, that kind of thing. When you start finding those people, who would they recommend, and would they be willing to give you an introduction? Now, really simple way, high level though, hey, when it comes to introductions, and this applies for referrals or applies for a lot of ways, but hey, would you mind so-and-so giving me an introduction? Sure, I'd be happy to. Great. Do you mind doing that via email and you can just connect both of us? Yes, happy to. Wonderful. Great. When are you going to do it? Because I want to make sure I can respond right away to make you look good. That sounds silly, but a lot of times people say, oh yeah, I'll do that, and then they turn around and they let somebody else, and they forget about it. They don't ever do it. You don't want to bug them. So this way it holds them accountable, and they'll do it right away, right at the end of the conversation, more often than not. Once you have that, then I want you to have that willingness to go in there and say, look, I'm going to interview 5 bankers, just 5, no matter what. Just to think of it as an obligation, as a learning experience. And when you go in and say, look, help me understand, they sit down, I want you to look at the sort of the demeanor they have. If they're like, oh God, yeah, whatever. But say, look, I'm looking at starting a business. I'd like to create a long-term relationship, and I'd like to understand how you approach things. If a banker is not willing to invest time with those questions, then fire them. In fact, don't even hire them. But then when you sit down with them and say, hey, thank you so much for sitting with me, a few key questions. What for your small businesses, how many businesses do you have that you work with that are in, use your target range, that do less than $200,000 a year? If they sit there and go, yeah, we don't really have any. That's going to be a bank that is, and it's probably one of the big banks, that will take your loan or take your application but never actually help you. Now, in some cases say, well, we have a lot, and okay, maybe they act as a checking account or savings account and say, help me understand how much that's going to cost. What does that look like? What are the benefits? But then you say, okay, and I don't need money now. This is key with bankers. Bankers don't like to give money when you need it. Bankers like to give money when you don't need it. So if you talk to a banker and say, look, I would be looking to build a credit and a relationship with you. I don't need to borrow money at this point, but I'd like to understand what it looks like going forward. If that doesn't get a banker all hot and heavy, then something's not right. So helping the bankers understand that you're looking at a long-term relationship, you're looking for an organization that wants to grow with you. Now, if they say, oh yeah, we have a lot of businesses with small savings accounts and checking accounts, great, wonderful. When it comes to doing loans, do you have lines of credit? Do you mean home equity lines? How would you help me finance this business? You're not saying you're asking for the money, you're asking how they would do it. And they say, well, you could apply for a loan. It's like, okay, how many loans and use whatever margin or what you're saying is like of 50,000 or 100,000 have you made last year? And if they don't know, or they say, well, actually, most of our loans are over 10 million, which is in a lot of banks, they're going to take your application and waste your time. That is not somebody you really want to be involved with. Doesn't mean they're bad people, just isn't a good fit. But first off, how many people are there? Second question, how would what are the different types of loans? What are the types of things you have? What are the benefits? Why should I come here? You're asking them. You're asking what types of loans. And then also ask them, what else should I be asking? How do you look at this? Because when you can find a bank that focuses on small business, that helps. Now, the next thing is going to be, help me understand how the loan process would work. And this is important. It may seem simple, but the process is different. And if you can actually be sitting across the table sometimes in a very small bank and say, well, you know what, I'm president of the loan committee. Or I sit on the loan committee and I'm one of the people that helps make the decisions. If it's a big bank, I say, yeah, we send that to New York and they make the decision. Okay, fair enough. And what are they looking for in those to define if a loan is going to be successful or not? Now here's some very basic questions. But when you ask this, it's not like you're going in there and saying, yes, I would like to apply to work with you. You're saying, no, I haven't decided who I'm choosing to work with yet, and I'd like to understand how you work and how things work for you and in the banks. And you may even go so far as to say, hey, do you guys typically work with smaller banks? It's like, no. It's like, who in the market is known for working with small business? Because they will know for sure. Now they may tell you, they may get grumpy, but if they do, again, they're not the right fit for you. But you're looking for a banker that you can engage with that's going to help you be successful. Now, the third part of this is first we're going through and making sure that you have that willingness to interview at least 5 different banks. And ideally you get referrals into specific people. 2, asking those questions to see, is this going to be a good fit to help you solve your needs and coach you on what it means. Now, I skipped over something that's really important. It took me forever to realize that the best question I could ask is, I don't understand. I don't know what that means. Can you explain that to me? So if a banker starts using $10 words, or maybe it's not even a fancy word, it's just something you're not familiar with, say, hey, help me understand, what does that word mean? And if they're like, well, at that point, you have the opportunity to say, look, if I choose to work here, that means that you're going to work for me, and I need to understand that you can communicate with me. If this is a problem, that's okay. You don't have to be snarky, but don't be afraid of being direct. Because if it's that way when you're starting, it isn't going to be any easier down the road. So then the last thing is with the smaller bankers, sometimes they can be great referral and relationship people. Because again, most of the bankers, particularly in the business banking world, have their own quotas. Meaning they have to create a quota of how many people they bring in. They have sales goals, they have their own goals. So they're doing networking functions. They're out there talking with people all the time. And in a perfect world, you get somebody who ends up becoming one of your champions. They say, okay, so here's what I'm thinking on this idea. What do you think of this? Well, Steve and John over there, they do the same thing. Okay, great. How well do you know them? Well, they're customers of mine. Would you introduce me so I could talk to them? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe they've got the market cornered. Maybe they need help. I don't know. But the right banker, and I've personally experienced this, and I've referred a lot of people who've experienced this, will help connect in those ways. Do you know, who else should I be talking to? Who do you like as an accountant? Is there an accounting firm you like? Is there somebody here? But again, we're looking for people who have that expertise in those small areas. Because when we think banker, as a layman, we think, oh, banker is a banker. No. The reality is there's 100 type of bankers, from big commercial to annuity to mortgage to all sorts of different bankers. And the reality is we're trying to come in and find out who is the right small banker. So if you have interest in this or other questions, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and keep looking at some of the other videos we have. Or you're welcome to go to the Solopreneur, aspiringsolopreneur.com. And we've got courses, we've got a whole bunch of things to help people with their small business. But if you have questions, leave a comment below, subscribe. Love to hear from you. Keep smiling.